Welcome to another edition of Cattle Call. I'm Susan Littlefield. Cattle Call, by the way, brought to you by FNBO, the Great Big Small Bank. Well, we've got a markets. Is there concerns when it comes to what's happening on this cash? Kind of a steady, quiet type of midweek that we saw within the market trade. We know the Goldman roll is wrapping up today, but we also know there is very heavy cattle out there in the country. We've gotten some decent growing weather. We're going to break down that and a whole lot more in this week's report. As you see, joining me, Brad Kooima. He is with Kooima Kooima Varilek out of Sioux Center, Iowa. And we're, by the way, broadcasting the National Association of Farm Broadcasting annual convention underway in Kansas City, Missouri. And I tell you, this cash this week, I think there was some anticipation, Brad, that we might have seen at least steady numbers. But now I'm hearing out in the country, there's some concerns that it might be to the lower side.
For sure. That's going to be the rub of the green here this week after last week's fiasco. I mean, $4 lower, that's a big sell-off in 1 week, right? I mean, I had gotten 190 for the 2 or 3 weeks before that. And then, having to grudgingly take 186 after that big future sell-off of last Friday. By the way, thanks for having me on. I would assume you're getting a couple of awards again this year. You certainly deserve to, in my opinion, as good as you are at this job. So thanks for letting me join on with you here. So if I could just back up just a little bit, Friday we had this a huge break in the boxes, right? $6. Now, since then, the box beef has stabilized. And in fact, in my opinion, I think the boxes are probably okay here. You saw the chuck roll have a big break, get back into where more normal range of what those prices had been. And so now I think as we work through the holiday period here, once you get to the week of Thanksgiving, then you can start to talk about how are the middle meats and what are we going to feature for the Christmas and New Year's holiday. And that segment of the beef market, Susan, is in good shape yet. So here, as to your cash question, there is a little bit of 186 being sparingly bid in my neighborhood. That's what the market was Friday. So I'm a little encouraged by that early indication on a Wednesday here that maybe we can be steady or maybe a little bit better. The South, on the other hand, I don't know. There's talk of maybe some upgrading kind of cattle that didn't sell real good today in Kansas, but I think it's too early to really call the test. What they're going to get last week, they were 187. It would help, of course, our cause a little bit if we didn't have this weak basis. December cattle 184. So if you're hedged, you're probably a little easier seller than you would be if futures were closer to where the cash was.
Let's take a look at the box beef trade, because I think it's been kind of all over the road as of late. Are we starting to see some possible stabilization in what we're seeing?
Absolutely. So to not to bore you, but so when you get kind of like this is your jam, like it is for me, you've heard me talk about price discovery in the live cattle market and how important I think, and a lot of us do, that we negotiate for cash cattle, right? If you want to have some more perspective, I just did the math for kicks here today. So the box beef at noon, which comes out at 11, by the way, I don't know why they call it noon beef. Anyway, I think they had 125 loads traded. Well, we killed 125,000 cattle. Roughly, we produce about 2,200 to 2,300 loads of beef every day, and we're getting told what the price is based on a ridiculously small percentage. So there's a ton of beef that gets sold formula. The vast majority of it does. So first of all, a little bit of a disclaimer on how that box beef price even is, whether that really reflects the bulk of the trade. But as I mentioned, the chucks were the main reason. The chucks had gotten very, very high, and some of that has to do with cow slaughter, and now they've adjusted back to what would be very average for what they should be worth. And now, as we move into the Thanksgiving deal, some of us are going to have a turkey one day, and then we're going to go back right to a normal deal. And in fact, the typical deal would be, I think the box beef is essentially bottom for now. And then when you typically get to the week of Thanksgiving, it starts to firm up because the next order is the feature in the grocery store is going to be a turkey, and it's not going to be a ham. It's okay. Let's get back to what are we going to do for Christmas here? A loin, a ribeye, a strip steak, blah blah blah. And of course, the hamburger demand is crazy, phenomenal, right? So I don't see I don't see that there's a demand in my estimation of demand for them. We've got a seasonal deal right now where often the market sells off going into that first week of December. Everyone remembers, and maybe we should visit about that. Last year we had a big break in November, and often the futures traders' memory is about 12 months long. So there's that. I've heard it mentioned to me as well about they go, well, the last time Trump got elected, in 2016, the cattle market was a wreck. And I'm going like, no kidding. That started in May of 2015. And, yeah, it was a wreck. It stayed crappy through almost all of 2016, largely because we weren't very current, largely, in my opinion, because the market changed in demeanor because the pit closed. And I don't know that it had anything really to do with who was president. So anyway, but so those are some of the the stuff that when people don't know what else to talk about, that's what we talk about, right? So at the discount that we are, it might drag the cash a little softer, but I don't see that there's a large supply of cattle. I wish we could take some weight off of this thing, Susan. That's the girl in the room. Weights were down a couple pounds last week, but they're still big. There's no denying it. Don't you think it's largely weather related? I mean, performance related?
That's what I was going to ask you. I mean, obviously, up until this point, into this forecast we're supposed to get next week, it's been ideal growing conditions for these cattle, and the feed's been cheap.
Correct. And yet, I think it's largely the growing conditions. I think there's two things. I think the growing conditions, and the second thing is that back to these formula trade cattle, the packer influenced cattle. The packer wants to have some grade, right? Look at the choice select spread. So I think some of the weights are bigger because the packer's telling their controlled cattle, hey, you know what? We're going to put a couple more weeks on these cattle because we want to try to get some more grade. And I, as a farmer feeder up in my neck of the woods, I sure don't see that. Especially as we're finishing up this calf fed crop. When we were getting 190, well, even at 186, most of these cattle still work. I'm a little more worried when we get to these high price yearlings in the first quarter of the year, what that may look like. So I think it's a combination of the formula cattle traded being a little bit heavier, and then the weather being so outstandingly good. But that might change. It's rained here all day. There's a chance of some weather next week, and so we'll see how the winter starts here.
December 15th is always an important date on the calendar, not just because it is Brad Kooima's birthday, but that's just kind of the marker that you use as you look at this cattle trade. And you talk about being a little bit short term on the cautious side leading into December 15th.
Yeah, well, thanks for the little birthday plug. You don't even look forward to those so much anymore when you get this old, right? But you're right. There's a interestingly enough, there's a seasonal on feeder cattle on one of my brother's birthday, which is April 23, which is a seasonal low time for feeders. It's but if you look at generally, if you pulled out your warning, okay, disclaimer, seasonals are not always, they don't always work, right? Okay. And it's taken a while for the seasonals to get straightened out after that COVID fiasco that seemed to change the rules on everything for a while. But generally speaking, yeah, there's we're finishing up all the calf fed cattle. So there's a lot of them. They're a little bit bigger than normal. Same thing we got this year. We go into a little slowdown in demand as we, come out of the grilling season. We go into Thanksgiving. We got a different feature, turkey, ham, blah, 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 going back to school. And so then the seasonal deal is, yeah, but then by the first week of December or so, things seem to change, particularly from a demand standpoint. Years where you start to get a little early winter, or the worry of a little bit of early winter also will influence that. And so, yes, there's a very strong seasonal. Now, would that make sense to me this year? It certainly would, to be a little draggy here yet. Chop wood, as I like to say. In other words, maybe not get anything done, hopefully not break very much, but don't get much done to the upside. And then maybe try to reestablish it. But the key to the thing, part of it we can kind of control a little bit ourselves, and let's stay current. Let's stay current. Let's not give the packer that leverage back that he wants so badly. We'll go into I still think we go into the first quarter with numbers that are much, much tighter than they are now. And with a market with absolutely no premium, that's another thing, Susan, is there any incentive to overfeed cattle now? Not when the futures are this much lower.
Right.
So short term, it's kind of annoying because cash might not perform, but in the longer term, that's very, very positive. continue to encourage these guys to sell cattle on a timely basis. So, yeah, be careful a little bit here for a couple of weeks, and then hopefully, when we get down the road a couple of weeks, I can talk a little more confidently about the market when it's uptrends.
Sounds good. So what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you, Brad?
kkvtrading.com will tell you a lot about us, or the phone number 712-722-0023.
All right, Brad Kooima has been joining us for this week's Cattle Call. Quick reminder, commodity futures and options do involve a substantial risk of loss not suitable to all investors.